Okay, we have the sides of our box completed, and now we want to do a DXF output to laser cut the components. Now, I didn't do the internal components. You can go ahead and do those. I think you understand the process. It will be the same from here out. I'm going to go through and I'm going to name the individual bodies. Now, this isn't really necessary, but I just prefer to do this. So I'm going to name this back. And I'm going to name this right side. Now, the right side and the left side on this one happen to be identical, just mirror images of each other. But I'll go ahead and give them individual names, even though we could just make the same. We could just make one of them, call it side, and make one of them twice. Same way with top and bottom. Now, if we did make a change, though, to the top or bottom, that we didn't want to be reflected in, or left or right, that we didn't want to be reflected in the other side, we just had to make sure we do it in time, in history, where it would not be mirrored to the other side, whatever change we make. Alright, so I've named these bodies. I'm going to right click on the bodies folder and I'm going to create components from those bodies. So now I have individual components for each one of those bodies. I'm going to immediately right click on the back component and I'm going to say ground that component. Alright, so now it's in position. Now, I had a sketch down here earlier that I was experimenting for something. I'm going to delete that sketch so that it doesn't confuse anybody. And so the next few steps are just for the purpose of getting the DXF output, not necessarily for how to assemble this box. But I'm going to go to J for joint, or come up here to assemble and do joint. And then I'm going to select the inside midpoint of that panel, and I'm going to select the midpoint of this panel. And I'm going to go to the motion tab and I'm going to tell it that I want to do a planar joint. And then I'm going to go back to the position tab and I'll look at it from the top view, and I see that it is in front of this one, so it made it those face to face. I'm going to flip that so now they're flush to each other. And then I'm going to go back to the front view and I'm going to drag this arrow out here. Now, you could try to match these up. I don't know about your laser, so I'm just going to drag it out here just some distance. And if I wanted to rotate it, I could also rotate it to some rotation angle. That depends on your table and your laser, how you do those few steps. So I'm just going to say OK to that and leave that as was, or as is. Now, anytime I want to get back to where I was, if I drag this back to the time, we see that it goes back to where it was. Now, if I drag it again, it may or may not stay in that position. It might move to some other position. If it does, you can just drag it and move it. If you decided you wanted to rotate this, double click on the glyph for the joint, and you could then rotate it and to a precise angle, whatever you want. And we'll just repeat that process several more times. So I'll do, this time I'll do the keyboard. So I'll do J for joint. I'll select the midpoint of that face. I'll select this face. And again, if I look at this from the top view, I want that to be flush. So now those are flush. And I'm going to move this one. And again, you have to decide how you want to nest these. I'm going to just manually nest these. There are routines to do automatic nesting to optimize the use of your sheet. In fact, what you might want to do, if you know the size of the table, is to do a sketch with the size of the table here so that you can see how you're laying out your components on the table. So I'll do that again. So I'll do J for joint, and I'll select this component, and I'll select this component, and we know that we're going to have to do the flip, so I'll go ahead and do the flip, and then you can move it to wherever you want it. You could put it here, you could put it over here, wherever you want it. I'm just going to do this, and of course the components that you modeled in here, you would do those components the same way. We're getting all of these laid out flat, so I'll do J for joint again, and I'll select this, the component, and then I'll select the grounded component. I'll tell it to do flip so that they'll be flush, and then I'll move this to wherever I want that to be moved to. Now I'm just eyeball moving this. You could put in precise distances, and if you really wanted to lock this down further, you would put additional joints in here to mate together these faces. I'm just leaving it free to move, but you might want to do those additional steps. Now if I drag the timeline back, we see that it goes back to where it was originally. And so these would actually, if we were doing this as an assembly, we might want joints in this assembly configuration. And then if I want to make any changes, if I go back in history, I can make any changes to any component and it will automatically be updated in the timeline. Now we're ready to do the DXF for our flat pattern once we have laid these out how we want those nested on our table, including the components that were inside here, somewhere out here. And if we don't have room on our table, of course, this is the same as this one. It just turned around 180 degrees, same way up here and here. We don't have to do this all at once. I'm then going to do a new sketch, and let me get out of everything first. Okay, so I'll do a new sketch, and I prefer to do it on the origin planes. I could do it on this face or this face, but I prefer to always select the origin plane. So I'm going to select that plane, and I'm going to tell it to capture the position where those components are right now. I'll make sure that none of my other sketches are visible, so I'll turn off that sketch, and then I'm going to do P for project, and I'm going to then click on this face, this face, this face, this face, and this face. If we had any islands in here, let's say you had a partial cut that didn't go all the way through, you would have to click on that island as well. We don't have any islands in this case, so I'll just say OK. Alright, so now I've projected everything into a new sketch, and I could turn off these bodies. I don't really need to turn those off, but let's just turn one of them off. So if I turn off that body, we see we have this projected sketch. And again, if we make changes to the object, because we projected that face, the sketch would automatically update as well. And then I'll right click on this sketch, and I'm going to say save as DXF. I'll give it a name, and I've already done it one time, so I'll call this Laser Flats 2. Now this is one thing you would have to do new each time. So if you make a change in these, you have to export to DXF again, or save as. I did notice I didn't go up here and do export. I right clicked on this sketch and I did save as DXF. If I go into AutoCAD and open it up, we see that here is our DXF in AutoCAD. This is from a trial that I did earlier. And one thing we might need to be careful about is, depending on the software that you open up the file in, I'm going to type in AutoCAD minus DWG units. And I see that in AutoCAD it came in as number 1 inches. I would need to change this to number 3 millimeters. Your software may or may not take care of the units for you. You'll have to be careful though about those units. And so that is getting a DXF ready for laser cut for our panels for our box.